I think there's an acknowledgement that the town, the department, the collective, whoever takes responsibility for the welfare of the citizens of Montclair and those passing through fail. I don't want to paper over the sense of outrage and anger I felt and feel about the blitheness with which my concerns were handled. I am sure that people are overworked, but there is a responsiveness quotient that we deserve as fellow citizens. The people who work for Montclair, who live here and travel here, deserve that degree of safety. We all deserve that degree of safety. And I don't feel that I did enough, and I feel that keenly. But I also don't know what somebody should have to do to be able to get the attention of those who are charged with keeping us safe.
Welcome back to the Montclair Pod. I'm Mike.
And I'm Farnoosh. And this week we have kind of a serious episode, everybody, but in the best way, I think. Some scary stuff, too.
Yeah, there was a complete school lockdown on Monday because the high school received a threat, but the whole district was locked down. We'll be talking about that later in the show. But Farnoosh, if you recall, that happened minutes after we got home after doing a big interview.
That's right. Big interview with Senator Cory Booker. We sat down with him at his Newark office. Of course, he was the mayor of Newark from 2006 to 2013. And when he was there, the school district was under a state monitor. So we had to ask him about that. Also, what was it like getting Mark Zuckerberg to write you a $100 million check for your schools?
Yeah, must be nice. And he's also got a new bill out to increase the standard deduction, the standard tax deduction for families to $75,000. And we're going to talk with him about that and much more. We're going to also broadcast a lot of that interview in next week's episode, but none of that is even what this episode is supposed to be about. That's all just like bonus stuff. This episode is actually about street safety here in Montclair, and we've been putting it together for months. And it really started to come together when we heard a story involving David Folkenflik, who you heard there at the top of the show.
That's right. Now, if you're listening to this, maybe you'll also like to listen to public radio, NPR perhaps. And if so, you have definitely heard David Folkenflik's voice. He's been covering the media there for more than 20 years.
Yeah, he started covering the media for NPR right around the time we graduated from J school. And I was kind of obsessed with that beat at the time because I was trying to work in the media and learn the business. So I really remember that time and listening to him. So when I first heard this story, I was really shocked. First, I didn't know he lived up the street from me. And second, because as you'll hear, what happened to his family was just terrible. And the most shocking part was that it was probably preventable.
Yeah. October 2023, his mom, who lived with him and his family, was struck and killed crossing the street outside of their home in Upper Montclair. She was hit by a car that was turning left and evidently didn't see her crossing the street. And as you said, Mike, what makes this story all the more heartbreaking is that Folkenflik knew it was a dangerous intersection. He'd seen accidents there and their aftermath a number of times. He called the town repeatedly to warn them of the danger, and then this happens.
Yeah, so we're going to talk with him about what exactly did happen, what he took away from the whole terrible experience, and where he thinks we need to go from here.
And sticking with this subject, we're also going to be chatting with Jacob Neiman. He's the new Complete Streets director in town, and it's a relatively new position. The position sprung out of our local Vision Zero task force, a committee devoted to making our streets safer for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. And it's been a bit of a fraught position. You know, the first Complete Streets director who was on this show, Laura Torchio, left the job after just a few short months, never explaining why exactly.
Yeah, we're going to ask about that and get into Neiman's plans for the job. And Farnoosh, in one of the great ironies, you were actually listening to that interview in your car, driving on my street when you hit a pothole right in front of my house.
Yeah, the pothole that you described on the episode that you'll hear about.
It's so meta.
It's so meta. And honestly, holy pothole.
It was a big one.
Pothole. I mean, you weren't exaggerating. And normally you exaggerate, but this was like I feel like you even understated the pothole.
Undersold that pothole. Well, it all really does come full circle because they filled it.
They did.
Like the day after.
We were there to witness it.
Yeah.
From your lips to PSE&G. Is it PSE&G? Who does that?
I don't know. I think the town probably filled this pothole. Okay. You know, who knows? I will say, though, like, the street itself is still covered with gravel, like loose gravel from when they initially dug it up like 6 months ago or whatever. And when cars drive down the road, it kicks the gravel up and it's all in the lawns and it's like completely destroyed the apron to our driveway. And it's just, what I'm saying is I still have something to complain about.
Good. Well, then we still have a podcast. It is an action-packed episode for sure. And we're going to talk about the school vote. The vote happened this week, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But we'll also discuss the pending litigation that could still throw a wrench in all of this referendum stuff.
Yes. A heavy, rusty wrench that will almost certainly injure someone and possibly give them tetanus. This wrench could be devastating. And speaking of throwing wrenches, transitioning, you hosted a birthday party at Dave & Buster's. Were there any wrenches thrown there, metaphorically or literally? I want to hear all about it because I couldn't go.
Well, for being a party with 25 children under the age of 10 for the most part, it was very civil. Shout out to the Dave & Buster's staff. They were very helpful. I brought lanyards for every child to put their Dave & Buster's game card into and wear around their neck so that I would prevent loss of like card loss, because those cards are valuable, right?
Yeah, it's like $5 to replace the card, right?
It's not replaceable if you lose it. And the sad part is you lose like all your accumulated ticket points and then you can't shop in the store. And one little girl did lose her lanyard right before her mom came to pick her up, right before she was about to redeem all her points. I felt so bad for her. So I had an extra card. I gave it to her and it was actually her birthday weekend. Shout out to Mackenzie. I felt so bad. I was like, I'm so sorry. Here's when next time you come, it's on me.
Did anybody get put in timeout?
No, thankfully.
Did you put yourself in timeout and get a margarita?
Later, I did go to a friend's house and kick my feet up and have a couple of adult beverages. I deserved that. I earned that, Michael. I also thought about getting matching t-shirts because I did lose a child for a little bit. I lost a child for a little bit.
Who did you lose?
She'll not be named. She was found. She was the littlest of all of them. And she was playing a game and was not visible. And my husband and I were searching and my daughter was like, I think she left. And I'm like, I don't think her parents would leave. I was doing roll call like every 30 minutes, And so luckily we found her. And
where was she?
She was just playing a game and, she had to go inside to play the game, one of those covered areas.
Yeah.
Good thing I found her because the first thing her mom said when she came was, where's my daughter?
She's working on that. Yeah, we're totally going to find her. Not totally 100% sure.
Oh my gosh. We couldn't find my son and his friends at the end at all.
That makes sense.
Of course, the three boys who were the oldest and the ones that we were not worried about. But I was almost close to like having a manager say their names over the loudspeaker. I was like, what are the chances of 3 11-year-old boys getting kidnapped? My husband goes, they will return them right away. No worries there. But that wasn't the only birthday party of the weekend. Mike, you threw a little shindig for Vanessa.
Yeah. So Vanessa had a big birthday. And so we went, I wanted to do something. We just had a big party over the summer for our anniversary and my birthday. And she didn't want to do another big party, but we wanted to do something that wasn't totally extravagant, but fun, that could kind of accommodate a lot of people. You guys were there with your kids and there were other kids that were there, obviously. And we had about 30 people and we decided to do it at Lackawanna because it's kind of a cool space with all of that art there. And they have the BDP, which stands for burgers, donuts, and potatoes. They have really good kind of In-N-Out style burgers and the fries are excellent. They also have shakes and they have incredible donuts. And it's not very expensive. It's like we could feed a ton of people for a couple $100. And they also have a bar there. So the bar was stocked and there was plenty of beer and cider and they had mixed drinks. And that was also very affordable. And then Ironbound was there. And I through Ironbound, Charles Rosen, I got connected with a woman named Svetlana. And she runs a bakery with her husband, Mimo, and she's a Ukrainian refugee and he is a Syrian refugee. And they came together and have created this unbelievable bakery.
Yeah.
And did you have any of their cupcakes?
I had a donut, so I was good by the time their cupcakes came around, but they were gorgeous. You almost don't want to eat them because they're beautiful. She uses real flowers, real dried
Yeah.
fruit. It's like portrait worthy. And she had a bunch that were gluten free as well, which my mother-in-law really loves. She's gluten free. And we'll definitely be working with them again.
Yeah. So that was great. And their story is amazing. I'd love to have them on at some point to hear more about how they got together, how they came to be in Montclair.
Yeah.
And their store is called, and I'm going to probably butcher this, it's called Sonia Schnick.
Sonia Schnick.
And that means sunflower in Ukrainian. I
Uh-huh.
hope all my Ukrainian friends out there tell me I did a great job pronouncing that, please. But anyway, they were delicious. The vanilla, and I have to just say, the vanilla cupcakes had like a salted caramel center that was like, we've got a couple of them left. I'm going to treat myself one maybe today, possibly. In any case, a good time was had by all. We actually got some wine too from Ironbound because they make wine there too, in addition to the cider. And Vanessa is a fan of
Cape May
their
Rosé.
white.
The Cape
Yeah,
May Rosé.
Cape May Rosé. Yeah,
Excellent.
I love that one the most. There's a white that Vanessa likes. In any case, it's kind of a great place for a party, I think. And it won't last forever because obviously, one way or another, the space is going to get developed and it's going to change probably. But for now, at least, it's a really cool space. It's accommodating. People can walk around and check out the art while they chow on some burgers. And those burgers are quite good.
They
Although
were delicious. Really,
the fries
really good.
also are kind of standout.
Great place to have a child birthday party as well. If you wanted to bring in like a face painter or make it like a stroll, like bring your little bicycles because that
Yeah.
space is empty unless it's booked and you can have free range there. And there's, of course,
Yeah.
the pickleball courts in the back. So a lot of flexibility there to kind of make your own birthday adventure. And so I had a great time. Thanks for inviting us.
Well, absolutely. But it was just a good and affordable kind of way to celebrate with a bunch of people. And that's harder to do these days. We all have to be price conscious. Isn't that right, So Money?
It is right. All right. So let's move on and talk about your YMCA trip.
Yeah, that's right. So I finally bit the bullet and joined the Y officially and had my first workout as an official member. And I made a discovery that you will appreciate.
Really?
Yes.
Tell
Well,
me more.
it speaks to the money coach side of you once again.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that this will eventually become a segment on So Money.
All right.
So for a single membership at the Y, it's $72 a month, $92 for family, and there's typically a $100 initiation fee. But get this. If you are a member of Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey for your health insurance or your dental insurance or your vision insurance, then that $100 is waived and you get a 15% discount on the monthly. So it ends up being like $60 and change. So obviously not everybody has that insurance, but
It's exclusive to Blue Cross Blue Shield of New
that's
Jersey.
what he asked me. So I didn't know to ask about this. And the kid at the front desk, whose name I can't remember right now, I should have written it down. He asked me because I was like, "Oh, there's a $100 initiation." Didn't realize that. I didn't. Not like I did a ton of research on this. I knew I was going to join kind of regardless. But he asked me if I had Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I was like, "Good looking out." Like,
Yes.
a lot of places do not ask you proactively if you
No, they
qualify
do
for
not.
a discount, and
It's the same idea where you flash your like AARP card or your AAA card or your student ID. I didn't know you could actually use your health insurance card to save money.
I mean, to me, it was like we almost didn't keep that part of the insurance. And I'm like, woohoo! I'm glad we did. And I really do appreciate them for bringing it up to us. And it's kind of like the difference between a nonprofit community organization like the Y as opposed to a strictly for-profit gym like, some of the others may be. Maybe
Where
they
the
wouldn't be as...
discounts and the fine print. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that. Maybe there are other affiliations that get you discounts there. As I spend more time there, I will do more research and learn
Well,
how to life hack the Y.
you don't need life hacks. You got You got great fortune, Mike. You've got a great wife. You've got a beautiful daughter. You've got this podcast. You've got this Y membership now. You're just like all set.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed.
Hash brown blessed.
Hash what? Brown?
There was like a bit that I saw where somebody was trying to say hashtag, but they kept on saying hash brown because they're like a Gen Xer like me and don't understand. Hash brown blessed.
Okay, moving on to the focus of today's episode, traffic safety in Montclair. Let's start off with some numbers, though. According to the latest data from the Montclair Vision Zero Task Force, between 2021 and 2023, pedestrians and cyclists were involved in only 23% of the total crashes in our township. But those same individuals accounted for 100% of all traffic fatalities in Montclair during that period. None of us are really surprised by that, I'm sure. If you've lived here long enough, you know someone who's been in or has witnessed a car accident. And I mean a real car accident, not a fender bender in the parking lot, which I've gotten once or twice, but real intersection tragedies, fatalities. These are happening more often than we'd like. In fact, last time Laura Torchio was on, if you remember the former Complete Streets director, Mike, she said, the reason we have created this role essentially is because people are dying. That is a quote.
That's right. It is deadly. And David Falkenflick lives on one of those dangerous intersections, and he warned the town again and again and again about it, and nothing was done, not until there was a real tragedy that sadly happened to the very family that was trying to prevent it. Here's our conversation.
This has been a town that historically, in recent decades anyway, as it has grown and as it has really appealed not only to people to move here, but as a magnet drawing in people from other towns to enjoy the restaurants and the theater and the concert venue and the like downtown. It's part of why we want to move to a place like Montclair, right? It has placed a primacy, it seems to me, from the cheap seats, moving people through town swiftly rather than moving people through town safely, and placing an equal emphasis on people, whether they're walking, bicycling, scootering, or driving. It seems like the driving culture of New Jersey, as in Southern California, where I grew up, is pretty cemented, and that was sort of reflexively, without much thought, where priority was given. But we've got young children moved here for a reason. My mother lived with us, so we had a senior citizen living with us in our home as well. And it's part of the cycle of life that is also, I think, inherent to the appeal of Montclair. That it's walkable, that it's approachable. So one of the things that we discovered was that people seem to treat a lot of intersections in residential neighborhoods that were at times either thoroughly residential or at times within a few blocks of slightly more semi-commercial areas like Upper Montclair on Valley Road or near Watchung Plaza, as though these were inconveniences. They treated these intersections a little bit as though they were off-ramps or on-ramps to one of the state routes nearby. And you just saw cars smack into each other. One of the things I've never seen before, I've lived in California, of course. I went to school in upstate New York. I lived in both of the Carolinas, North Carolina longer than South Carolina. I lived in Baltimore and in Maryland for years, and DC for years, and New York City. I've never seen something that I saw here, where people come to the four-way stop, and when the light turns green, they expect to be able to turn left ahead of incoming traffic. And if incoming traffic is not graciously allowing the guy turning left on the other side to go, that guy will then try to speed ahead of you.
Yeah.
Now, this is a desperately dangerous move. I've witnessed it lead to people sort of hammerheading into each other at intersections. But it also means the pedestrians who are walking, when that light turns, that's their first opportunity to walk safely, given the way most of these intersections operate. And it means that pedestrian has essentially no time to get through. Twice cars came up onto my property through accidents. One time they came up into my front lawn. Another time a guy ran into trees, right? There's nothing other than blind luck than the fact that there weren't people walking on the sidewalk outside my house at that time. And that said to me this was a problem. So I had been trying to flag this as an issue for some time, but it seemed to me as though it's a brilliant community, lovely place, wonderful residents. And the people who were driving like that were not people driving the way they would in their own street. And I thought that this was a real problem waiting to happen. In fact, it just was a real problem.
So you move here, you live on this busy intersection, and you immediately see these kinds of things happening where people are trying to take a left turn and beat the traffic at the light.
Right. And these, let's be clear, that the streets that we're talking about are significant arteries in some ways for the larger neighborhood we live in, but they are not state roads. They are not connecting one city to another city, right? They have a start and a stop. And so the fact that they're doing it even there, I think, is telling as well.
So you see these accidents waiting to happen, or in some cases, at least 2 cases, you saw accidents. So what do you do?
So what happens is I call City Hall, and they say there's a traffic bureau at the police department, and that's really where this has to start. The way it was explained to me, and I don't remember who I spoke to inside town hall, anything that would be done to improve the intersection has to be done after a review. And I was told, I called 5 times. And I was told, I think the second time it would take many weeks to do the review, but that it would take at least 6 weeks to just get the review started. And it could take months because they were backed up and had a lot of concerns, but they would get to it. And I would email and get numbers and names of people at the police department, and they would say, we'll get to it, and then ultimately fade out of the way. And it turned out later, as I learned, that people had been rotated off the assignment, and it was as though each time you're starting fresh, and nobody actually got it done.
So no institutional memory of these issues.
No, and I had some emails and some calls that I had taken notes on vaguely here and there, but it was real. 5 times I did this, and they said, well, it would take a study, Mr. Fogenflake. Gosh, it's really going to take... They basically were saying, don't get your hopes up. It'll take a long time, and we'll see what it leads to, if anything. And I really kept saying to them, this was of deep concern. There were kids crossing those crosswalks before and after school. So twice a day, 180 times a year, you have kids both being drawn to Buzz nearby, and there's private school nearby, but also kids getting up off and on buses to go to other schools in town. And that's just the kid population. But, that was, something that I was trying to flag for folks. And I found, I'm sure people were of goodwill and overwhelmed or what have you, but it did not get the attention that it needed. And I felt that calling 5 times about something as a homeowner in good faith, documenting things, sharing them, doing my best to flag things, wasn't getting anywhere.
So obviously that must have been just frustrating, but then the story gets tragic. Can you tell us what happened next?
Sure. This is something before what we're about to talk about. I would talk about to people at the bus stop. I would talk to people at restaurants. I'm sure I was insufferable about this topic because I'm sure that people who have lived in town a long time say, great, somebody moves here from New York or somewhere else, and they get an obsession about something local. Congratulations, welcome to town, right?
Yeah, right.
But this mattered. And on October 28th, 2023, I was coaching my youngest's soccer rec team, and so I was not home at the time, but my mother left the house. She had lived with us, moved in with us from California. She'd been widowed. My father died in 2019, and she went to get a Lyft ride to see a friend who had also been recently widowed for a lunch with a woman who had become a new friend here. And, as it turns out, I ended up getting emails from some of her friends saying she hasn't turned up and were concerned. But that's not how I learned of it. But nonetheless, it turned out Mom had been struck by a truck. You're talking about 12:15 in the afternoon on a beautiful sunny fall day without a cloud obscuring any of the sunlight. 83 years old, driving a large pickup truck that he used to haul trees in his tree hauling business, slammed into her going about 17, 18, 19 miles an hour. And she died almost instantaneously. May I say that people there did a wonderful job of trying to be with her if there was any chance of protecting her, of just giving her dignity in her last moments.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like. And I remember reading about it at the time and hearing about it because I knew who you were because I've listened to you for many years. And then when we met later and I learned just how much work you had done with the town to forestall something like this happening. I just couldn't believe it. You were aware of the danger, and then it impacted you so directly. What are your thoughts about that now that you have some distance?
Yeah, I wish I had more distance than I do. It's at once, it's been several years and feels like moments ago. I would say a couple of things. First, I would say that in the afternoon that it happened, Police were incredibly responsive, thoughtful, and sensitive, and offered me numbers of people to talk to at the department to follow up in that moment. I was not shy about pointing out that I had raised the issue, and they were like, look, you need to talk to folks. And they were not sloughing me off. And then I believe it was the next day I spoke with police chief, and the deputy police chief came to my house, and we've spoken a number of times since, less in the last year and a half, I'd say, but in the year that followed, a lot about this intersection, about other things. And I appreciate them both for their time and their efforts. I think there's an acknowledgement that the town, the department, the collective, whoever takes responsibility for the welfare of the citizens of Montclair and those passing through failed. The acting town manager at that time spent time with me as well. He publicly said, and then sort of revised what he's saying, but essentially the intersection was not wired properly enough to be able to give, is old technology, to give people time to cross the streets. There were no flashing symbols as to when you could walk or not walk, which are cues for pedestrians and for motorists, as well as everybody else who passes. There was no delay. There are all these things they put into place.
Last year, they upgraded that intersection, and it took some time, but I remember that happened. So now there's a different system there. Does it work better now?
It works a lot better now. I think it's much safer. It's probably one of the safer intersections of that degree of traffic that we have. But I want to say all this to say that I don't want to paper over the sense of outrage and anger I felt and feel about the blitheness with which my concerns were handled. I am sure that people are overworked, but there is a responsiveness quotient that we deserve as fellow citizens. The people who work for Montclair, who live here and travel here, deserve that degree of safety. We all deserve that degree of safety. And I don't feel that I did enough, and I feel that keenly. But I also don't know what somebody should have to do to be able to get the attention of those who are charged with keeping us safe. This is the sort of thing that they need to get under control as a quality of life issue and as a fundamental demonstration of the capacity of effectiveness and of responsiveness. So the study that needed to take 6 weeks to even be commissioned, which actually was more like 6 months, which turned into never, essentially happened overnight. And they found there had been 28 significant serious collisions, not just glancing side swipes, but serious collisions in that intersection in like a 3-year period. I feel fairly confident that will have significantly declined, although there are still occasional things. Just driving is itself a risk of the world that we take on.
Now, obviously, the first question or thought a lot of people have when they hear a story like that is, did he sue? But you're not allowed to sue because of the way the laws work in New Jersey. Is that correct?
I mean, litigation isn't my first impulse in such moments, but I certainly had lawyers with whom I consulted about how best to proceed, and I'm not the lawyer here, so others may take issue with this characterization, but my understanding from those who reached out to me was that essentially local municipality is protected under state law from such litigation unless it has affirmatively taken a step that would increase the risk or likelihood of such a fatal event, as opposed to, as what is certainly part of the equation here, the failure to do anything over the decades to prevent it. I guess it's a commission versus omission structure here, but the township responded pretty swiftly in their way of thinking to what happened, which I took as important and correct. And I think it's greatly enhanced the safety. But I think it's also a sign of the fact that there had been a collapse of any responsible stewardship of that question prior. I point out it also took 20 months to get done.
Yeah.
Which is on the far outside end of what had been said to me. And it took my kind of writing the township to make sure the software functioned properly. It was actually functioning, if anything, more dangerously. It was giving people incorrect walk signals. The timing was off. Such things take a little time. There are going to be glitches, but it took a while. And we have to be attentive, and people have to care for things to get done properly. But this is not an impoverished community here. This is a community with resources. We need to be able to show that we can get things done. And so it was tough. But in terms of the question of litigation, I don't know that would have been the option I pursued, but I don't think it was available as an option to any great effect because of the way in which state law regulates when municipalities can be held legally liable for such incidents.
It makes people feel, I think, like there's no accountability ultimately. When you, as the citizen, do the right thing and you say, hey, there's a problem here. I'm worried. I'm worried about public safety. There are kids around here, and that falls on deaf ears. And then the unthinkable happens to the person who is trying to make the intersection safer, and ultimately nothing is done about it. It makes people angry. It made me very angry when I first heard about it.
Look, I mean, you could argue, if you're thinking about the politics of Montclair, that there's a very indirect and oblique kind of accountability. A guy like Sean Spiller, who held leadership roles here, was mayor here, runs for governor, and I think doesn't even perform particularly well in Montclair in that primary. Now, obviously, our new governor is also from Montclair, but I don't think people were looking to offer electoral kudos to how the former mayor presided over the township government.
He's running for a new office now, David.
And what's that?
He's running for the head of the National Teachers Union.
I mean, it's to my mind, it's astonishing that one could in the state of New Jersey hold both jobs at the same time, an elected position, and be the head of the state teachers union. Was even if he's not overseeing the Board of Education in the way that mayor might once have done, it's a complicating thing. But I also acknowledge our mayors and our town council members are not fully paid positions, and therefore people are, unless independently wealthy, are unlikely to be able to hold such jobs without holding other positions in life. That is reflective of the vibrance, the life, the diversity, the texture of the people who live here and the community that it serves. And it also is incumbent on us all to take a part in that, to make sure it happens and not sort of check out. And, it is always, a time of crisis when people actually pay attention. But, in the famous phrase, we can't let a crisis go to waste. We should take advantage of that and get a handle on it and then walk a little bit more confidently forward. The Vision Zero thing was a welcome thing to come along, and council under previous and current leadership has embraced it, but it needs to deliver on it. It needs to commit to it. And some of those things will be expensive and some of them won't be expensive at all, but will require that attention be paid. As you may know, my sister was killed by a drunk driver 31 years ago, in Seattle. My dog was killed years ago by a motorist. The one of the 3 times I don't hold the motorist responsible, it was a dark and rainy night, and the dog, which was very young, got free and loose. But to me, I drive a car, and none of us are perfect drivers, but the whole point is the structure has to be put into place that compel us to drive more thoughtfully. It cannot simply be on the idea that every one of individual motorists, of whom there are presumably tens or hundreds of thousands a year through Montclair, have to execute their driving perfectly for their impulses to say, I will be safe at all times. But actually, the streets have to be configured. The signs have to be configured in such a way. If you think about not far from where we live, there's an intersection on Valley and Bellevue, and there where the county made some upgrades and they turned on a 4-way signal and also with new and upgraded walking signs. And I was promised as a demonstration of what would happen on my intersection, that there would be at least a 7 to 8 second delay. I spent time with urban planners and traffic engineers in the weeks and months after my mother's death, trying just to learn more and report it out. I'm a reporter, as you know. It's just what I know to do. It's kind of my default to, be constructive in a time of grief.
Yeah. And
they said that actually an 8-second delay is kind of a gold standard. They say that's phenomenal. Like, you will do much better with an 8. And the delay is, the idea is there are reds in all directions for a little bit of time. Yes, motorists will chafe a bit, but it's a bit. You'll add maybe 2 minutes on to a trip across town if you hit a couple of those lights. But, in the aggregate, you're going to make things much safer. It would be that way for a day or two, and I would go with a stopwatch. And finally, I took my eldest daughter with me, and we'd go and time it day after day. For a week, finally, I called the police back. I'm like, guys, you're getting 2 seconds. They're like, Dave, it's fine. I said, it's not. And we did. It turned out that because that is a road that is both involves county and local roads, that the software for the county overrode the software for the township, and it didn't register that it was supposed to be giving the extra time. The software kept overriding it. So finally, I got the name of a county official who had the ability to do this. I had to explain what had happened, that this had been promised as a sign of good faith, as sort of a demonstration the township could do things. But I wanted to see what that looked like when it actually worked. And within 18 minutes, that county official had taken care of it. The county road engineer, it was fine. It didn't take him long. Wasn't much. It's the figurative flip of a switch that probably required, an email, a setting be changed. I don't know. I'm not the engineer, but something very modest. But somebody had to point this out to him, and he had to decide to act upon it, right? And so then suddenly that intersection worked at Valley. And I said, that's what you have to prove to us at our intersection. And it took, I think, 20 months from my mother's death. I was promised maybe 6. They, to be fair to them, they didn't make it a hard promise. They said it can take a little while, but they said about 6. They had to really tear things up. It cost the township a lot of money. I mean, you could have perhaps spent half the money and done 74 different things at that intersection. Like, I don't know why, for example, there are studies that show that if you paint murals at the center of intersections, it tends to lead motorists to slow down. I mean, that costs the amount of, a couple $1,000s in paint. Yeah. You could probably raise that with a few bake sales, around our neighborhoods.
Painting murals on the road.
Yeah, literally on the intersection can cause, you see that sometimes. I saw this in Long Beach in California, which is not far from where I grew up, when I was covering something out there some years ago. And they're like, the cops were explaining, they're like, no, you're going to slow down if you see a huge sun painted at the middle of this intersection somewhere. These are things I learned. I don't have expertise, but I've become steeped in some of this stuff because it matters to me a lot, right? It just matters to me a lot because you cannot expect motorists to be perfect on their own. The structures have to be set up for that. There are times where, 4-way stops are put in relatively recently and people still blow through it. We have to find ways to take care of the people who take care of us and to take care of the people who rely on the town for their lives. And so, you ask how I feel about this. I went and spoke after my mother's death, and as Vision Zero was starting to get a little bit of a foothold. Sean Spiller was the mayor then, and he was part of the council that approved the spending for the intersection where this happened. I spoke, I think my remarks were about to go to 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I spoke to 3, he's like going to cut me off at 3 minutes. And I'm like, you have to let me finish this thought. I apologize. I know it's over 3 minutes, which I had not intended to do, but this has to be heard.
Yeah.
Like, you guys have to listen. And, I think this goes to a greater theme that's playing out in Montclair, which is sort of a responsiveness and a transparency in how the place operates. I'm a reporter, and, it's great to report on big things with national implications or whatever. But, the story of something specific and seemingly not just local, but just personal, means a lot for the people at the heart of it. And God knows this means a lot to me. But I believe that there's something that speaks to the quality of life for us all here and the possibility of, in what is a terrific community of caring people, what could be a better path forward.
I appreciate you coming on and talking about all of this and taking so much time on a workday to tell a story that must be very hard to tell. And I think people will really benefit from hearing you say all of this, because it makes it more real and it makes it more personal. And so thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Anything else you want to add to the conversation?
I mean, what I'd say is thanks for inviting me to chat with you. My mom, Vivian, was an extraordinary woman and a lot of fun, really just a woman of wit and verve and intellect and life. I owe her so much, but I certainly owe her this.
Thank you again to David Folkenflik for sharing his story with us. We have a longer version of that conversation where we talk more about traffic safety, but also our schools a little bit, our municipal government. Mike, you even talked to him about transparency of the various presidential administrations he's covered, including the current administration, right?
Yeah, that's right. We talked a little bit about the fact that he's part of an NPR Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. It was really an interesting conversation.
All right. To our conversation now with Montclair's new Complete Streets director, Jacob Neiman. He's only been on the job since January, but before that, he was chair of the Complete Streets Oversight Board. He was also on the planning board, treasurer for the Montclair Center, and he's held a number of jobs in local government. He's held tax assessor jobs in West Orange and Ocean, New Jersey.
Yeah, he's actually totally a Jersey guy. But him taking on this role as Complete Streets Director comes as kind of a surprise. His predecessor, Laura Torchio, who was the first Complete Streets Director, only lasted 5 months. We discussed that as well as his plans for making Montclair safer for all. And we begin with Neiman sharing how he initially became interested in street design and transportation. Take a listen.
I grew up in a town in Middlesex County that was very much not like Montclair, very capital S suburban. And I couldn't really get anywhere. I couldn't really do anything because it was just a bunch of tract housing in the middle of nowhere. And I'd always go down to Princeton. I loved going there because as a teenager who didn't really have access to a car, like I could walk around, I could go to shops, I could go to restaurants. And going to school and having that planning background, suddenly I had a lens through which to see why I had such different feelings about being in Princeton versus being in my hometown, right? And how the places people like spending time are those that make space for people as opposed to just cars. That planning background and policy background led me to work in local government. I was working down in Monmouth County for about 8 years before starting to work in West Orange, just next door. And since I've been in Montclair, I've wanted to get involved. I've been around local government my whole life, and I know how vital it is for folks to raise their hand and say, I want to participate, I want to help out, right? In a very real sense, local government is an ongoing project in participation. And if folks don't raise their hand, the work can't get done.
Let's get into that. Tell us about the role as you see it. What is the most important thing that the Complete Streets Director needs to accomplish?
So the goal of the role, the mandate for the role, is to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious and fatal injuries on Montclair streets. It's pretty simple. The simplicity belies the difficulty of doing that, but that's the objective, that's the goal. Now, before getting to that point, right, it's not a flip a switch and suddenly we're safe. It's a process. And a big part of that process is figuring out how to incorporate the principles of complete and green streets, which the Complete Streets Ordinance lays out, into the regular habits of the municipality, the county, anyone who's using our roads and having an impact on our roads, right? So that's going to include the planning board or the zoning board and the projects they all work on and take those principles into account. So building into the regular repaving program a process by which not only are we making sure the street comes out smooth and clean, but also that the intersections are made safer for pedestrians, that on particular roads that need safe micromobility infrastructure, we're putting those bike lanes so that folks can ride their bike safely with their kids, or someone using a wheelchair, for example, can get around where there perhaps isn't a sidewalk. I live on a short 1-block street, and on that street is a senior care facility. And I regularly see folks riding their wheelchairs in the street because the sidewalk is not safe for them. But the street isn't safe either right now because there's no space set aside for them. And so it's only because it's 1 block, it's small, that they're able to do that. And they really shouldn't have to.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up an important point because we often know about these issues, whether they're general or very specific. Like there's a horrible story of Vivian Falkenflick who was hit and killed at the corner of Park and Bellevue. And her son, David Falkenflick, had warned the town about that intersection a number of times. And nothing happened. And then there was this tragedy where his own mom was killed at that intersection. And you bring up this example of your own street where you're aware of an issue. And this happens all the time. Farnoosh, recently, like you saw an accident near your house, right?
Yeah, I live on the south side of town, and South Mountain and Gates, that intersection. The town had actually put up several additional stop signs along Gates, so making a lot of the corners on Gates 4-way stop signs, except South Mountain and Gates. My son's This bus stop is right there. It's dangerous. And I know that there was an agreement last fall, I believe, to put 2 more stop signs there. Last month, there were 2 really big accidents. Fortunately, no fatalities. I guess it begs the question, why does it take so long? Why is the process so complex to go from residents saying, this is a potentially tragic area, and the town recognizing it, to then actually putting up stop signs?
So I'm very familiar with the intersection you're referring to specifically. I used to live on Gates Avenue, and so right in that section. And so I do know the anxiety induced by having to go through that stretch. I also know this was an area of concern. I listened to your recent episode that mentioned it, and I know that there's a plan in place to also put speed humps on Gates Avenue.
Great.
And so in that section. And so there is work being done. Like many things, the time it takes can be multifold and have different reasons for it. One of them is quite simply just resources, right? The person power to get a stop sign installed, the literal acquisition of the stop sign. Like certain resource constraints can play a role. Weather can have an impact. When you're installing certain things, you can only do it at certain times of year for it to be sustainable in the long term, right? You don't want to pave in the middle of January because that road surface is not going to last. Things like that can have a role. Depending on the intersection, there needs to be certain kinds of engineering studies done to verify that the intervention is the correct intervention, right? While it may seem intuitive in certain circumstances to use a certain kind of traffic calming or traffic control measure, like a stop sign or a speed hump, municipalities and other people who control the roads, whether it be the county or the state, have to essentially create a basis for them, the decisions they make. They need to show their work. And that process can take time to make sure that they're following the proper rules and procedures. And that can be very frustrating because unfortunately the traffic's not stopping. The incidents are not stopping in the time that work is going on. One of the real challenges, and frankly, one of the things I'm working on, is making sure that all the things happening behind the scenes are visible, even if they're not happening in the world, right? So that the engineering study is being done. That's something that we can tell people, right? And that we can communicate.
Right.
That the analysis is being done of an accident that took place there, or a crash that took place there, so that the police department can understand like what caused this accident. And we're working on developing a tool where you can go on a website and see, it's in this stage of the process.
Yeah. Great. It's no secret that you're taking on this role right when we had someone in the role, but then she left, I think it was like months into the job. From the public's perspective, it seems like there's a lot of potential dysfunction in this department. What would you say to someone who's like, what's going on with the Complete Streets Director department? Why can't, are you here to stay?
I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to work in the town I call home. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to do this sort of work that I'm so passionate about and have the skills I believe are necessary to make it an effective, long-lasting process here, like part of the municipal government here in town. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm serious about getting this done.
I wanted to follow up on something else you said before, relating to the paving of streets. And I wasn't sure, to what extent you were involved in that. But since you brought it up, I live on Bellevue. Bellevue
Sure.
was paved like a year and change ago. It was beautiful for about 2 months. And then there was some utility that needed to do something and they dug up the street and now it's ruined. There's potholes everywhere. There was so much debris that all of the aprons that they just installed with the Belgian block are all pockmarked and messed up now. Yeah. And so can you explain to us the level of coordination that goes into a project like repaving the streets, which I'm sure costs millions of dollars over the course of years, and when a third party, like either the sewer or the electric company or what have you, that needs to dig up the street to fix a gas main or whatever, has to come in and do that? Is there coordination? Why does stuff like this happen?
Yeah, it's a very common and very reasonable concern and frustration because we've just spent a boatload of money on fixing something and now it's just gone. I can say The sewer and water utilities are municipal utilities. There's a heck of a lot of coordination there. And so that is well coordinated. There obviously are emergencies that come up where a water main breaks or there's some sort of issue with a sewer pipe that needs to be addressed. And that doesn't care when the road has been paved. And so those are going to be addressed and those are going to be patched appropriately as they can be. With regards to something like PSE&G, that's a bit of a more complicated answer. They do coordinate in the sense that they tell us where they're going to be, but they are an organization that's answerable to people other than the municipality. And so while they're giving us notice and will frequently put back what was there, especially if they've done once they go beyond a certain level of work, they have to repave the entire street, for example. They'll do that. But they're doing what is required of them. They're not going above and beyond that. And so one of the plans for the department is to find ways we can get them to go above and beyond, right? Mm-hmm. Find ways that we can work into municipal code or perhaps working with the state to find ways to create more accountability to these utilities.
We want to address the survey on the jitney as well as the New Jersey Transit survey on weekend service and expanding service. But ahead of that, one of the big complaints, I suppose, if we're the mouthpiece to the complainers in Montclair, is that there are two Montclairs in many regards. And one is that there is a safer Montclair and a not so safer Montclair when it comes to public safety and roads, and that the equity piece of this is also, I'm sure, top agenda for you. How is your team ensuring that we're going to make those improvements, those pedestrian safety improvements, and we're going to distribute them equitably across all the wards?
Yeah, of course. So one of the primary responsibilities of the position, and one of the things I'm doing, is coming up with a prioritization matrix. That prioritization matrix takes data we have about known injuries, known risk factors, and underrepresented communities, and it gathers all this information, plugs it in, and tells us where to focus our energies and efforts. Mm-hmm. And that's how we are going to figure out where we need to focus on. So working with the Safe Streets for All grant Montclair received, and the consultants who've developed that, Michael Baker and Mercer Planning, we have kind of started that process and come up with a rough matrix, and it highlights the areas in town that are areas of concern, right? The places that are most dangerous. And frankly, it's all over. Every ward has streets that are dangerous to pedestrians and those who use the road in their car, on their bike. And so we need to have interventions across town because the risks are across town. And that risk matrix does take into account communities that haven't been invested in as much in the past, but it's also taking into account where the transit stations are, right? Where bus stops are, train stations, traffic generators like houses of worship and schools, to make sure that wherever those entities are, parks, that we're focusing our attention there. So our interventions are the most impactful. Because you could put a bike lane on a given residential street, but it's not necessarily going to be helpful to as many people as perhaps putting it on Harrison Avenue, a street with a lot of speeding and a long stretch of straight road that sees a lot more traffic. And so that prioritization matrix is really going to allow us to focus on where it's most needed, regardless of the means of the part of town.
And as Farnoosh mentioned, we had a survey where we asked residents what they thought about a jitney. There's been a lot of talk about extending New Jersey Transit service through the weekend in Montclair. Can you talk a little bit about both those issues and where you come down on them?
Yeah, certainly. So I can only speak a little bit. I'm relatively new in the role, and I've happily joined the subcommittees working on that. What I can say in a broader sense is that anyone taking a bus, riding on a train, is a person who's not in a private automobile. And we do a really good job of figuring out what the cost of public transit is, right? Whether that be the fare or the quote unquote subsidy we give it to operate it. But we have a really poor ability to quantify the positive externalities of it, right? We're not accounting for the car that's not on the road, that's not generating emissions, that's not generating traffic, right? And so public transit is a key part of the all of the above approach to making sure our streets are safe. It also provides another opportunity for those who don't have the means to have a car to get around, right? As someone who has taken the train to New York on the weekends, I know it's 15 minutes longer to walk to the station. And if I miss the last train, I've got to wait 2 hours. And that's a real discouragement from taking the train from a town that has 6 train stations. And it gets me in a car driving to Newark to take the train from there. I'd rather not have to do that. Our streets would be safer if I didn't have to do that. And our air would be cleaner if I didn't have to do that.
We have a couple more questions before we wrap. We want to talk about speed cameras. And then you brought up Church Street. And, that's
Sure.
a hot button issue. Do we make it pedestrian only? Do we keep it a one way? Which would you like to take first? Speeding cameras or Church Street? Pick your poison.
Pick my poison. Let's do speed cameras. Let's get the non-controversial one out of the way.
What is your take on them?
So first of all, I want to be clear that the implementation of any sort of automated enforcement is currently illegal in the state of New Jersey, thanks to the state legislature. They both passed a law disallowing it and also allowed a prior pilot program to expire, I believe, back in 2014 or so. And so no municipality or entity can use automated enforcement in New Jersey. So I want to make that clear. The second part is whether Montclair is going to implement that is a policy decision of the mayor and council. They need to decide if they believe it's right for them. What I'll say about automated enforcement ties into regular enforcement, right? The Montclair Police Department issues thousands of traffic violations a year. The Traffic Bureau is incredibly busy each and every day. And at the same time, right, how many of us have gotten a ticket or know someone who got a ticket for a moving violation? It feels like not very many, right? So the disconnect between the amount of enforcement that is happening and the perception of it is real. But that goes to show, right, it's not enough. There's clearly so much more enforcement that could be done. And that's not their fault. They only have so many people, so many officers, and they can only spend so much of those resources on traffic enforcement. There's a lot going on. That being said, there are very real concerns about how that data is used and how that data is protected. And I think we're only at the start of this debate and at the start of figuring out ways that it could be done while protecting residents, individuals, anyone from the possible negative externalities that come with that, right? The possible facial recognition or whatever.
Now to Church Street. What should be done with Church Street, if anything? Or is it perfect the way it is?
So I think it's great the way it is. I think it's got a great wide sidewalk, which is a really undervalued thing in kind of urban design and town design. Having that space set aside for people really makes it a great place to spend time as a person, right? You're able to have those sidewalk cafes. You're able to go to a Montivino and have a bottle of wine. It's really wonderful. That being said, it's also got a couple of lanes of traffic. It's one way. I don't foresee that changing at all. I don't think making it two-way would be desirable or something that would be done. Whether it becomes a pedestrian plaza, for example, is, again, a decision for the mayor and council. But I will say that there's many ways in which pedestrian-only spaces become really desirable and exciting places to go. I think Church Street is like halfway there, right, with the wide sidewalks and the small feel shops, etc. And I think there are many different models you can look at where you either become pedestrian-only or possibly even do some sort of blended thing, right? It doesn't have to be pedestrian-only at 2 a.m. when places need to get deliveries, but it can be at certain peak times, right? It's a decision for the mayor and council at the point of time in which they want to take that up. But I just will say that places for people are really great and places for cars are less fun to spend time in as a person. That's why no one likes parking decks.
Thank you again to Jacob Neiman. It's kind of hard hearing those 2 interviews, Mike, with Folkenflik and Neiman back to back, because you hear this tragic, horrible story that could have been prevented if we had had the ability to respond to these issues when they come up. And then you have a conversation with Neiman, who seems to be saying and thinking and wanting to do all the right things to make people safe. But there are so many imperfections, so many speed bumps and frustrations that are out of really his control and our control for sure.
Yeah, it's like, how do you fix a broken system, even when everyone agrees that the system is broken? Who really knows? Some people may not see it in such a binary way, right? Like either it works or it doesn't work because no system is perfect. But when something like what happened to the Folkenflik family happens, it really does feel kind of black and white and less nuanced. Either you listen and do something about it, or you put it off and something horrible happens.
Well, this transitions us well to our next segment, a political conversation. Speaking of, when we all know, we need to change things up, but how do we do it? I think we all can probably agree that life's getting expensive and we need to support the middle class more. But how we do it is really where we get stuck. And we've got New Jersey Senator Cory Booker to talk to us about this.
That's right.
And Mike, tell me you didn't write another theme song about this because it is not appropriate.
Yeah, I know. I agree, but I couldn't really resist. It was I was excited. It was a good get for us, we got Booker and
We booked Booker.
yeah, we booked Booker. And that line is kind of lyrical. We booked Booker, but. So I gave it, this to me is
Fine, just
AI
play the
is
thing.
for.
Just play the thing.
Fine, thanks.
We booked Booker. We booked Booker. We booked Booker. We booked Booker.
All right, that was funky, but also a lot. So
Yeah.
don't do that again.
You should hear the extended version of it because it's actually I think it's a good song. We should put it out on Spotify.
Well, I was really thrilled that we landed this interview.
Yeah, a little mom and pop podcast like ours. We're like the Bailey Building and Loans of podcasts. Do you get that? Please tell me.
I don't. I did understand the MASH reference that he gave in the interview.
Yeah, that's right. He had a MASH. Well, Bailey Building and Loan is from It's a Wonderful Life. It's they're the mom and pop bank that old Mr. Potter's trying to put out of business.
Got you.
Yeah.
All right.
But we actually did talk about that very issue, independent media like us versus giant media conglomerates like Paramount, for example.
Yes. He's been very vocal about big media consolidation, and we talked to him about that. And we also reflected on his time as mayor of Newark when the school district was under a state monitor. And this week, he announced a new bill called the Keep Your Pay Act. The first $75,000 of income, it's a proposal, would be tax-free for households filing jointly with proportional tax relief for single filers and heads of households. There's a calculator online. We'll link to that in our show notes. Basically, the plan would more than double the standard deduction for all taxpayers.
Does it have a shot at passing anytime soon? That's the real question. You can listen to more of this interview on So Money, where you get into that and other kind of pocketbook issues. That's Farnoosh's other podcast, which if you're not subscribed to, you need to be. But here's part one of our conversation with Senator Cory Booker.
Senator Booker, welcome to the Montclair Pod.
I am so excited to be on the Montclair Pod.
This is a big morning for you. You were in Bloomfield earlier, making a big announcement about our taxes. Tell us about the Keep Your Pay Act.
Well, it's very simple. And this is a podcast where I can go a little deeper. Yes. So in 1913, we created a federal income tax. But at that point, it was just for the wealthiest of the wealthy, and this idea that you would create revenue for the good of all of society. But in a century later, you have a tax code where actually working people, middle-class families, are paying higher effective tax rates than some of the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest of wealthy of the 1%, who have all of these things built into the tax code to help them avoid paying taxes. So the effective tax rate of the top 1% or fractions of 1% is actually a lot lower than the effective tax rate of somebody who lives in Montclair whose family income is $150,000, $200,000. So I just think we need a big idea, simple, big idea at a time when we as a nation are seeing higher and higher costs, people working harder and harder and finding it much more difficult to make ends meet. So this is very simple, that no American pays taxes on their first $75,000 of earnings. And so for a family, a single mom making $60,000 a year, she's going to get about $6,000 back. For that family in Montclair making $150,000, has two young kids, they're going to be able to keep more than $10,000 of their money. And this is all paid for by getting rid of some of those tax avoidance things at the top and then making a tax system that's far more fair. In fact, the median income in our state and in our nation would have an 85% tax cut under this plan.
Can you dive more into the how we're going to pay for this?
Yes. So these tax avoidance things that allow people that are the wealthiest of the wealthy not to pay taxes. Everything from carried interest, which means somebody who is works on Wall Street and can claim as a hedge fund person that, I don't have to pay the full freight by something called carried interest, would get rid of those deductions. Would get rid of things that allow corporations to sort of write off taxes that they have to pay and that they owe. So getting rid of a lot of these things that are rigged in the system is what we're really trying to do.
So I can imagine that there would be people across the aisle that would, be in favor of increasing the standard deduction to $75,000, but convincing them to get rid of those deductions at the top is going to be harder. So can this pass?
Well, I think it can pass, and I think it will pass. I think that first of all, people on both sides of the aisle, where you're seeing growing discontent in the country, is that the majority of Americans now, can't take a simple family emergency like a car accident, $1,000 unexpected expense in their lives, to roll their families into debt that often spirals. So I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, this idea that we would have the biggest middle-class tax cut in our country's history that would help working families keep more of their money is a very hard thing for Republicans who've been arguing for tax cuts for a long time. But what Republicans have done with their tax cuts is they've created the biggest deficits we've ever seen. Donald Trump's 2 terms are racking up the greatest sort of profligate spending because in his so-called beautiful bill, they don't pay for the things they're doing. They still cut Medicaid, they still cut school lunch, they still cut veterans programs, but ultimately they're still blowing $1 trillion. I say no. I say we raise the corporate tax rate, not back to where it was, because again, I'm a pro-growth free market guy, but we raise it to 29%. That we raise the highest income tax brackets up to 41%. But more than that, we get rid of these things like carried interests and some of the capital gains tax deductions that people have that allow their sort of income from passive assets not to be taxed at the same rate that those of us who sweat or work for a living do. And if we have the White House, the House, and the Senate, this is something that could fly through. And most Americans, the overwhelming majority of the Americans, will be able to keep more of their money.
We talk a lot about big ideas in Montclair because we're, as you probably know, dealing with a substantial deficit in our schools. And the big problem that keeps on coming up, not just for Montclair, but for communities throughout New Jersey, is that the way that schools are funded right now doesn't necessarily compute given the needs of these schools, specifically with regard to like this 2% cap on taxes in terms of how much taxes can be raised versus costs. Just healthcare alone is going up.
Inflation alone, right?
30% healthcare costs have gone up. What are the big ideas for that your party or any party has in terms of how we fund education in this country?
Well, first of all, we start by not getting rid of the Department of Education. I mean, the things that I know from science funding for New Jersey all the way to special needs funding is not funded from the federal government like it should. And every New Jerseyan, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, or Independent, should be ticked off that we're a donor state. We're sending more of our tax dollars down to Washington than we're getting back. Now, I'm proud that I hold the record. The last 6 years I've been in office, there's been no period of a senator's career where more money has been brought back to New Jersey. And some of that is because I'm from the Motown view of being a senator, which is I'm not too proud to beg. I will do anything necessary, buy flowers for appropriators to get money back to our states. And I also, in all seriousness, do that, creating relationships across the aisle to get money to come home. So I'm one of these folks in New Jersey that says enough is enough. We need to be getting more investment from the federal government, because when you invest in New Jersey, we produce more for the national economy than most other states. But there is a serious problem on the local level in New Jersey. Now, I'm not running for state legislature or governor, but we have to start talking about how to rationalize our state government and have really big ideas that we should be debating and discussing. Like, for example, why do we have so many towns and municipalities to begin with that all have an independent school system, a police department? Think about this. There are more fire engines in Bergen County, New Jersey than all of Manhattan. And that doesn't mean that I want to cut fire departments. But I do believe when I was mayor of this city, Newark, where we're sitting, I would respond to pretty much all of Irvington's fires. If we had one fire department, would we find efficiencies in that? Yes, we absolutely would. And so I just think that we need to rationalize government in New Jersey, because New Jerseyans are paying a lot of taxes, and we yet pay more and more in taxes and then still have crises like we're seeing in Montclair. It doesn't make sense. So as your senator who wants to get reelected in November, my message to you is nobody's brought more money back in the last 6 years. And if I have my way, we're going to restore the Department of Education and restore the streams of funding to our state that help to support our local schools.
When you were mayor of Newark, you came into the role where there was already a state monitor overseeing the school district. What can you tell us about this relationship and more broadly, how city leadership can work with those in the education system in our schools? There seems to be a lot of divide, at least in Montclair, there's like a separation of those two departments.
Yeah, I think that the better example I can give you is what I did to deal with Newark's structural deficit. And we did have to work in partnership with the state to get ourselves out of it all. It really was a lot of tough decisions. I was working with a Republican governor who themselves cut money coming to municipalities and had to find a way out of no way. And what did we do when I was mayor? To be honest with you, I had to do three things. I had to cut the size of government. Nobody in New Jersey, I don't think then and since, has cut the size of their government as much as I had to do. Which was I cut Newark's size of its government 25%. And most of my departments, not all, most of my departments, we were able to make more efficient. We got more inspections done per inspector, more potholes filled quicker, just finding ways to make our systems more efficient. But I'll tell you, we raised taxes too, because cutting your way out of the problem wasn't enough. And even that wasn't enough. The next thing we had to do was grow our tax base. And we ushered, when I was mayor, the biggest economic development boom our city had seen in 60 years. And so Newark's population started growing for the first time in over 60 years, which again, more houses being built, more businesses coming in. It actually grew our tax base and increased revenue. So we had to do all of the above strategy. We had to cut taxes, cut the size of our government, ask our taxpayers to bear some of the burden, but also massively increase the revenue for the city by having a pro-growth attitude. So again, I didn't create the problem, but I was there to make the tough choices. And I used to tell my staff, all the easy choices were made. We have to make the tough ones that are going to be difficult. And I went out knocking on doors to thousands of Newark residents at the time, explaining to them the situation, and got a crazy experience that maybe few elected leaders have, where my approval rating went up when we owned the problem, solved the problem, and ushered in a new era for Newark.
I like the sound of pro-growth. We need that in Montclair. What would be your advice to find other ways to create revenue, not just support the school district, but the town at large? What are some modern, out-of-the-box ways to do that today?
Again, it's hard to, I was the mayor of the city from 2006 to 2013, 14. It's hard to do apples to apples, but I loved being a mayor. I love the responsibility, but also the pragmatism. There's no left or right way to as Fiorello LaGuardia said, to fix a pothole, you just fix it. So I did everything from invite conservative think tanks to come in and help me on crime fighting in terms of what happens when men and women come home. Why is their recidivism rate 80, 90% when that means you're committing more crime and going back to prison? How do we drop that recidivism rate? Well, we found really innovative ways. And when you drop the recidivism rate, that's more people working and it's less crime. And you get a double bang for the taxpayer. So we just found a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. In a housing crisis, this is when the housing bubble burst. I went everywhere I could trying to excite people about my town. Got developers that had never been in New Jersey before to come. Brought unions together with Wall Street banks to find ways to finance projects that were really creative. I brought record philanthropy into New Jersey, hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of building houses, and everybody from Bon Jovi to Oprah stepped up to help us to build housing in our city in a housing crisis, and that's why we were able to double production. leaders think outside of the box. And I know we've got great leaders in Montclair, great leaders across our state that in tough times have to have that big idea. And on the federal level, I'm telling you, if you talk to the average Montclair resident, they are frustrated that they're paying more and more in taxes and finding it harder and harder to live. And that's why what I say to Montclair residents is, I am trying to drive for your town the biggest relief on your taxes you've had in your lifetime, which is an idea like this that, as I've presented it in the early days to Teamsters, to policy wonks, everybody's like, wait a minute, you're right. If we just readjusted the tax code, that middle-class family in Montclair is going to have thousands of dollars more to be able to afford the increasing costs of life.
But those property taxes, that's the big pain point for Montclair residents.
I agree, and we know that those property taxes are three things: your county tax, your city tax, and your school taxes. And again, the big idea I have is let you keep more of your federal tax dollars. Maybe you'll be applying them to property tax. But I will just say for all of my New Jersey friends, this is a problem that has been talked about, I've heard, for 25 years now, is that taxes are too damn high in New Jersey. And we have to start thinking of big things to do, like why not have, instead of 566 municipalities, 21 government, or divide Essex County into two and let us sort of rationalize some of the services. I don't know what the big idea is, but this is a serious pain point. And my solution to it as your senator is, I want to deliver for you the biggest tax cut in American history for working people and cut your income taxes 85%.
I have to ask, you famously got Mark Zuckerberg to donate $100 million to Newark Public Schools.
Yes.
Can you imagine what Mark would do? Now, obviously, a much bigger school district in Newark.
Yes.
But still, like, A, how did that go?
Would you grade that?
Yeah. And B, like, is that something that we should try and do in our local school districts? Do these public-private partnerships, especially as we need to be very forward-thinking about the jobs of the future, given AI.
Yeah. So $100 million, just so you put that in perspective, for that size of Newark school system is a tenth of Newark School's budget. But remember, that was spread out over years. So this is it was a very small investment. What we use that money to is to try to trigger important reforms. And it helped us to do some pretty exciting things. The biggest thing that money went to is to give teachers more money. It went to increase teacher salary. And what we did with the union was then we could hold teachers more accountable and start to relax some of the things. Because when I went out and talked to teachers in schools, teachers would say, everybody knows the one person in here that shouldn't be teaching. And it's just so hard to transition them out. And so we raised teacher salary, got some really great a really great innovative union contract together. When you get the teachers union and a Republican governor to negotiate a teachers contract that worked and actually paid teachers more, it was a real success in that sense. But everything comes down to student achievement. And what I was proud of is by the time I was a senator getting ready to run for president, Newark at that time was the #1 city in America for children in poverty going to college. Now, we got hit like most New Jersey school districts did by something called the pandemic, which had a lot of impact on student outcomes. And so Newark school system, I think, is struggling as it continues to get back to its feet after that. But as far as an experiment in leaning into creating innovative schools, expanding magnet schools, expanding some of the high-performing charters, closing some of the lowest-performing schools and having them reimagined into these super schools that we had, we were able to boost student achievement and graduation rates in the immediate aftermath, sustaining that change given a lot of the challenges that school systems all around the country have had. It's been a little more difficult.
Thanks again to Senator Cory Booker for joining us. We will be airing part 2 of that interview next week, where we're going to drill down a bit more on immigration reform and enforcement, as well as political fundraising. You really got into that with him, Mike. And his favorite vegan restaurant here in Montclair. And can he pronounce Faubourg?
That's debatable, certainly. It's something that he's going to need to work on, I suppose, if he really wants to make
if he wants my vote, you know what?
Constituency.
Figure that out.
I feel like we only scratched the surface with him, honestly. He said he'd come back, and we do need to hold him to that. But we've also got Senator Andrew Kim coming on in a couple weeks, too.
Yep, we'll have all of the New Jersey leaders joining us eventually. We've done a lot in this episode, and we're not quite done, everybody. We've got some local news to cover.
Yeah, you people here for Senator Booker should stay and learn a little something about Montclair, New Jersey's school district. It's time for you to learn.
Sorry, not sorry. Okay, let's start with the big news, the school referendum. The town voted on whether or not to raise taxes to pay for a $20 million hole in our school budget.
And the votes are in, but it ain't over because as of Wednesday night, the election is so close that the provisional ballots that have not yet been counted could make the difference.
We're going to get into more of this next week with the superintendent herself. For the latest, though, go to our website, montclairpod.com. And of course, there are plenty of places where you can read about what this vote will mean to the town and our residents in the immediate future, including our website. But here's the thing. We're not really going to know, really, for a little while, how this is all going to play out.
Yeah, that's right, because there's a lawsuit being brought by a guy in town named David Heron, who we need to get on here. And he says the election itself is not valid for a number of reasons, but probably most significantly, he alleges electioneering, saying that the district interfered in the vote in a manner that is not permissible, specifically when the superintendent and some of the principals allegedly communicated with parents asking them to vote yes. Actually, the Montclair Local's Matt Kadosh has a good article about this from last October, and we'll link to that in our show notes. But wait, there's actually more school news. As we mentioned at the top of the show, there was some sort of threat called into the high school on Monday, and I initially heard about it from my daughter who texted me from class and said that a bomb threat had been called into the high school.
Right. I actually heard about it around the same time from the superintendent who called and left a voicemail for all families. And they, in fact, locked down the entire district, not just the high school, which received the threat. Later in the day, there was essentially an all clear called and the kids were released. And Turner eventually sent a follow-up email saying, quote, "We want to be clear. This was not confirmed to be a bomb threat. And at this time, there is no confirmed active threat to our school facilities or our students." She went on to say that it is also important to note that several school districts across the region reported receiving similar calls today. Currently, authorities are working to determine whether those incidents are connected. And this was sent out Monday afternoon.
Yeah, so I guess it was some other kind of threat if it wasn't a bomb threat. We're not sure, but we're going to find out and get you more information on that as soon as we can.
And finally, one last bit of school news, as though we needed any more. The Montclair School District is looking for a new business administrator. The current BA, Dana Sullivan, is only doing this as an interim, but maybe she'll apply for the full-time job. Who knows?
I guess that's possible, and she's a strong candidate for sure. She was the business administrator for the schools from 1997 to 2012. So, I mean, she may want to move on also. You never know. We'll ask her the next chance we get, but geez, she's put in her time, right?
Did you actually look at the listing?
Oh, yeah. It's very funny how normal it is.
Yeah, there's no mention of any issue like, hey, are you a real go-getter with a knack for numbers? Montclair Schools could be the place for you. Knack for numbers. That's not actually what they say, but I mean,
no, but you could just imagine like the real listing is actually very professional. I mean, what are they going to say? Do you know how to put out a fiscal dumpster fire? Have you ever manifested $20 million for a school district?
Do you know how to get top dollar for an old school building in need of a new roof? Or a slushie machine for that matter?
All right, let's do the one big thing.
We have a big supper this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, our one big thing is the same one big thing this weekend, and we're really focused on it.
It's called Supper with the Super, and we're hoping it's going to become a thing on the show. Superintendent Ruth Turner has generously offered her weekends and evenings to us to do these recurring table dinners and discussing big issues facing Montclair schools. I think it's a great way for her in kind of a more relaxed environment, talking about what she's got on her plate, no pun intended. And also, I think for a way for us to highlight some of the restaurants in town. We miss going to restaurants. Our restaurants need our support.
And a big part of these conversations is going to be your questions. So please send us your questions. We know we're going to have these conversations with her and people are going to be like, well, we wish you had asked her such and such and such. So please send us those questions at hello@montclairpod.com. And we will be sure to ask them every week, as many as we can. Obviously, this week, we're going to be talking to her about the referendum. We're going to be talking to her about that bomb scare. And we're going to be doing it in a cool, local, chill environment, eating some delicious food.
We'll save you a seat at the table. We'll create an emoji for the Montclair audience member.
That's a great idea.
Put on a Montclair hat or whatever.
Perfect.
I'm also going to be helping the Girl Scouts this weekend. My daughter and her troop are going to be selling cookies in Upper Montclair outside of the Chase Bank at the intersection of Bellevue and Valley in the afternoon. So if you're hankering for some do-si-dos or whatever they're called, Thin Mints, I can't remember the names, hit us
What are
up.
the peanut butter ones? Trefoils? No, the peanut butter ones.
Yeah, they sell
Peanut
out.
butter chocolate.
They sell out really fast.
Yeah, those are the best ones by far.
Come get your Girl Scout cookies.
All right. Until then, I always buy too many of those things and they're in my house forever and I eat most of them.
Well, you know what? Just come and donate. You don't need to buy
I
cookies.
will.
Just come and
Fine.
donate. Thanks for listening, everybody. We promised you a jam-packed episode, and I think we delivered. I think we did.
And then some. We got to do it again next week, too.
I know. And the next week, and the next week.
Forever and ever and ever and ever.
We'll see you in town, everyone.
See you
Give
in
Mike
town.
a hug if you see him.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed.
Hash brown blessed.
Hash what?